Hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in. My name is Michael Davis, and let me tell you, nothing could have prepared me for what happened that afternoon. At 65 years old, after years of solitude, I thought I was ready to open my heart again. I wasn't looking for a grand romance, just someone to talk to, laugh with, and maybe even share the quiet moments of life. But what was supposed to be a simple coffee date turned into one of the most bizarre experiences I've ever had. Let me take you back. I retired 5 years ago after spending over 3 decades as a high school math teacher. I now live in a quiet 2-bedroom condo in sunny Florida. My daughter, Sarah, lives all the way across the country in New York, and my wife, my best friend, passed away 3 years ago. Since then, life has been peaceful, yes, but painfully quiet. I filled my days with gardening, reading, and volunteering at the local library. Still, something felt missing. Companionship. Real connection. So, I decided to try. One day, my neighbor Linda, who runs community events, suggested I meet someone. Her name's Christine, she said. She's a retired nurse, lives just a few blocks away, and she's looking for companionship too. With a nudge of encouragement, I gave Christine a call. We spoke briefly, and she suggested we meet for coffee. A public place. Safe. Simple. As the day drew closer, I realized how nervous I was. It had been decades since I'd even thought about dating. On the morning of the meeting, I tried on 3 different shirts before settling on a crisp white one and an old blazer that still had a dry cleaning tag from 2014. I arrived at the cafe 15 minutes early, heart beating like I was heading into a job interview. I picked a table by the window, ordered a cappuccino, and waited. Right on time, Christine walked in. She carried herself with confidence, dressed in a light blue blouse, silver earrings that caught the sunlight, and a smile that instantly made me feel at ease. But just when I thought things were off to a good start, everything took a turn I never could have expected. That as she approached, I stood to greet her, and we exchanged pleasantries before sitting down. The first part of our conversation flowed easily. Christine shared stories about her years as a nurse and her recent retirement. She spoke fondly of her son, who had moved to Chicago for work, and her love for cooking. In return, I talked about my teaching career, my daughter who lived in New York, and my passion for gardening. We discovered shared experiences, our appreciation for quiet moments, and the challenges of adjusting to life after decades of structured work. For a while, the conversation felt effortless, and I found myself relaxing. But as the meeting progressed, Christine's tone shifted, signaling a transition from casual pleasantries to a more serious discussion. As the conversation progressed, Christine leaned forward, her expression softening but taking on a certain seriousness. She began by telling me how much she appreciated my openness and honesty, qualities she valued deeply. Then she explained that she had a few expectations, for specific conditions, for a relationship. At first, I thought her candidness was refreshing. After all, it's better to lay everything on the table than to dance around unspoken expectations. But as she detailed her first condition, my feelings began to change. Christine proposed a 6-month trial period of living together. While unconventional, the idea wasn't entirely unreasonable. Living together before making any deeper commitments could help us learn more about each other and see if we were compatible. However, it was the next part that caught me completely off guard. To move forward with this trial, she wanted me to deposit $20,000 into a shared account. This money, she explained, would serve as a commitment deposit to demonstrate my sincerity and seriousness about the relationship. She added that if the trial didn't work out, she would refund a portion of the money, prorated to the time we had lived together. As she spoke, I felt a wave of emotions, surprise, confusion, and even a little disappointment. $20,000. It wasn't the amount itself, though it wasn't a small sum. What troubled me was the principle of the request. It felt transactional, as if sincerity could be measured in dollar signs. I tried to maintain a neutral expression, but my mind was racing. A part of me wanted to interrupt and ask her if she was serious, but I didn't want to come across as rude or dismissive. Instead, I nodded and let her continue, though my thoughts were already tangled. Was this her way of protecting herself financially? Perhaps she had been hurt in the past and was looking for security. But the more I thought about it, the less it made sense. Relationships, especially at this stage of life, should be built on trust, mutual respect, and shared values, not financial deposits. I couldn't shake the feeling that her request turned what should have been an organic process into a business arrangement. What happened to simply getting to know each other over time, learning each other's quirks, and finding joy in shared experiences? This wasn't the kind of relationship I had imagined when I decided to step back into the world of dating. As Christine continued to explain her reasoning, I found myself trying to piece together what this condition revealed about her. Perhaps she had been burned in a past relationship, taken advantage of emotionally or financially, and this was her way of safeguarding against that happening again. But even if that were the case, it didn't change how I felt. The idea of starting a relationship with a financial transaction at its foundation felt wrong. It wasn't just the money. It was what the money represented. If trust and sincerity had to be proven through a deposit, what did that say about how she viewed relationships? I tried to empathize with her perspective, but the more I thought about it, the more my doubts grew. Relationships, especially at our age, should be about companionship and understanding, not about who can meet a list of demands. Despite my growing discomfort, I chose to let her finish without interruption. I didn't want to jump to conclusions or dismiss her outright. After all, I had agreed to meet her with an open mind. But as Christine moved on to describe her second condition, I found it increasingly difficult to imagine a future where these demands could be reconciled with my own values. Christine transitioned seamlessly into her next condition, clearly confident in her vision of what a relationship should entail. She explained that one of her lifelong dreams had always been to visit Hawaii, a destination she had long associated with beauty, tranquility, and romance. But this wasn't just any vacation. She spoke with enthusiasm, describing sunset strolls on the beach, scenic helicopter tours over volcanoes, and candid snapshots capturing the start of what she hoped would be a new chapter for both of us. At first, I could appreciate the sentiment. A dream trip to Hawaii sounded lovely, and it wasn't lost on me how meaningful it must have been for her to imagine such a special experience. But as she continued, her expectations became clearer and increasingly overwhelming. Christine expected me to cover all expenses for the trip. She justified this by saying she'd ensure everything was meticulously planned, relieving me of any stress. "I'll handle all the arrangements," she promised, "from flights to accommodations. All you'll need to do is relax and enjoy." I sat there, smiling politely, but internally my thoughts churned. A trip to Hawaii wasn't a casual expense, especially one lasting a full month. Beyond the financial aspect, I found myself questioning the practicality of such a grand gesture so early in a relationship. What struck me even more was her insistence on a professional photo shoot during the trip. Christine explained that she wanted these photos to symbolize our bond, a visual representation of our shared future. As touching as that might sound, the idea felt premature. We hadn't even spent a full afternoon together, yet she was already envisioning us posing for framed portraits in matching Hawaiian outfits that I couldn't help but feel uneasy. A trip of this magnitude wasn't just about money, it represented a level of intimacy and commitment that felt entirely out of sync with the early stage of our acquaintance. Relationships, at least to me, should progress naturally. This felt like skipping to the final act without even rehearsing the first scene. As Christine spoke, I tried to process what all of this might mean. Was her focus on grand gestures and elaborate plans a reflection of her personality, or was it something deeper? Perhaps she had spent much of her life putting others first, her career as a nurse, raising her son, and now felt it was her time to prioritize herself. While I could respect the idea of chasing dreams, the expectation that I would be the sole provider for such a trip felt unbalanced. It wasn't just about footing the bill, it was the implicit pressure to prove my worth through material means. I thought about the kind of companionship I was seeking, one built on shared values, mutual understanding, and simple joys. I wasn't looking for a relationship defined by extravagant gestures or financial obligations. The thought of starting something with this level of expectation left me feeling more uncertain than ever. As Christine transitioned into her third condition, I braced myself. By this point, I wasn't sure what to expect, but I knew I had to hear her out. Her third condition revolved around finances, again. Christine explained that if the trial cohabitation went well and we decided to marry, she would expect full control over our household finances. Specifically, she wanted me to hand over my retirement income, which she would then manage. She described her reasoning in practical terms. As a retired nurse, she believed she had the organizational skills and discipline to handle financial matters more efficiently. Each month, She would allocate me a small allowance for personal expenses, ensuring that the rest of the money was used responsibly for shared needs and future planning. At first, I wasn't sure if she was joking. Surely she couldn't mean that I would lose control of my own money entirely. But her tone was serious, and her explanation left no room for doubt. Christine even added that if I overspent my allowance, I would have to make up for it by taking on additional household responsibilities, such as cleaning or cooking. While she framed this as a fair and practical arrangement, it felt infantilizing. By this point, I struggled to keep my composure. Christine's first condition had been surprising, her second overwhelming, but this one felt outright controlling. Handing over my hard-earned retirement income to someone I had just met felt not only unreasonable but deeply unsettling. In my mind, marriage, or even cohabitation at this stage of life, should be about partnership. While one person might excel in certain areas, finances for instance, there should still be room for collaboration and autonomy. The idea of surrendering financial control entirely went against everything I believed in. I couldn't help but wonder what kind of dynamic Christine was envisioning. Did she see a relationship as an opportunity to assert control, or was this her way of creating a sense of security for herself? Either way, it didn't sit right with me. At this point, my instincts were screaming at me to end the conversation and politely excuse myself. Yet I stayed, partly out of curiosity and partly because I didn't want to seem impolite. Christine's confident demeanor made it clear that she believed these conditions were perfectly reasonable, and I didn't want to embarrass her by reacting too strongly. Still, a knot of unease settled in my stomach. The more I listened, the more I realized that Christine's vision for a relationship was worlds apart from my own. As Christine began outlining her final condition, I could feel my patience wearing thin, though I did my best to remain polite and attentive. She explained that even if we moved in together or got married, she would require us to maintain completely separate bedrooms. She elaborated that after over a decade of living on her own following her divorce, she had grown accustomed to having her own space. Sharing a room or a bed, she claimed, would disrupt her sleep and make her feel crowded. Christine added that this arrangement wasn't negotiable and was, in her view, a necessary aspect of maintaining personal boundaries and independence. That at first, I tried to view it from her perspective. Having separate rooms wasn't entirely uncommon, especially for older couples, and it could even have its advantages. But given the context of her previous conditions, this request only added to my growing concerns. What struck me most wasn't the condition itself, but the rigid and transactional nature of all her demands. There was little room for compromise, and each condition seemed designed to benefit her without much regard for how I might feel. As Christine finished explaining her 4 conditions, I realized how disconnected her vision of a relationship was from my own. I had come into this meeting hoping to find a genuine connection, someone to share quiet moments, mutual respect, and the simple joys of life with. Instead, I found myself listening to a detailed list of requirements that made me feel more like a business partner than a potential companion. I thought about the life I had built and the values I held dear. After a lifetime of hard work, I wanted my retirement years to be filled with peace, joy, and meaningful relationships. Christine's demands felt like they would strip away the very essence of what I was looking for: mutual kindness, trust, and understanding. While I understood that her conditions might stem from past experiences or a desire for security, I couldn't help but feel that her approach lacked the sincerity and warmth I sought in a relationship. After she finished speaking, Christine looked at me expectantly, waiting for my response. I took a moment to collect my thoughts before replying. I thanked her for being open and honest about what she was looking for in a partner. Then, as kindly as I could, I explained that I didn't think I could meet her expectations. Her expression shifted, first to mild surprise and then to a polite smile. She nodded, acknowledging my response without pushing further. I offered an excuse about needing to leave for an appointment and quickly wrapped up the conversation. As I walked out of the cafe, I felt a mixture of relief and disappointment. Relief that I had stood by my values and avoided a situation that felt entirely wrong for me, but also disappointment that the connection I had hoped for had turned out to be so far removed from my expectations. When I got home that afternoon, I sat on my porch with a cup of tea, replaying the conversation in my mind. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became that Christine and I were simply not compatible. Her conditions, while perhaps reasonable from her perspective, were not something I could ever agree to without compromising who I was. I also realized how important it was to trust my instincts. While Christine's confidence and decisiveness were admirable in some ways, they didn't align with the values I held dear: sincerity, humility, and a willingness to build something together, not apart. The experience left me with a deeper appreciation for the kind of companionship I truly desired. If I couldn't find someone who shared my values and outlook on life, I decided I'd rather continue on my own than compromise my peace of mind. Solitude, I reminded myself, wasn't the enemy. A mismatched relationship, on the other hand, could bring more trouble than joy. In the days that followed, I found myself reflecting not just on my experience with Christine, but on the realities of dating later in life. Many of us carry the scars of past relationships, and it's natural to want to protect ourselves. But I believe that genuine connections are built on mutual respect, trust, and shared values, not rigid demands or financial obligations. For anyone stepping into the world of relationships at this stage of life, my advice is simple. Know your worth, trust your instincts, and never settle for less than what brings you peace and happiness. In the days that followed, I found myself reflecting not just on my experience with Christine, but on the realities of dating later in life. Many of us carry the scars of past relationships, and it's natural to want to protect ourselves. But I believe that genuine connections are built on mutual respect, trust, and shared values, not rigid demands or financial obligations. For anyone stepping into the world of relationships at this stage of life, my advice is simple. Know your worth, trust your instincts, and never settle for less than what brings you peace and happiness. As I settled back into my daily routine, something unexpected began to happen. I didn't feel lonely. In fact, I felt more grounded than I had in a long time. There was comfort in the familiar rhythm of my days: quiet mornings with coffee and a crossword, phone calls with old friends, and the freedom to plan my time without compromise. The encounter with Christine, though disappointing in the moment, served as a powerful reminder of what I valued most in life: not lavish trips or financial arrangements, but authenticity, companionship, and emotional balance. In solitude, I rediscovered the quiet joys that had always sustained me. A walk through the neighborhood park, the scent of jasmine blooming at dusk, a favorite song that stirred memories rather than regrets. These small moments were enough. They didn't demand negotiation or conditions. They simply were. I also found that my capacity for hope remained intact. Just because one connection hadn't worked out didn't mean the idea of connection itself was flawed. Perhaps love at this age looks different than it did when we were younger. It's not about passion that burns quickly, but about warmth that endures. It's not about changing for someone else, but about standing beside someone who respects your boundaries and embraces your true self. That kind of love, I knew, was still possible. So I let go of any bitterness and chose gratitude instead. Gratitude for the clarity the experience had given me. Gratitude for the peace that filled my home. Gratitude for the understanding that being alone doesn't mean being incomplete. And most of all, gratitude for the courage to walk away from something that didn't feel right, because sometimes, that's the most loving thing you can do for yourself. There may come a day when I meet someone who shares this season of life with grace, humor, and mutual understanding. But if that day never comes, I'll still be okay. Because I've learned that the most important relationship you'll ever have is the one you build with yourself. And in that relationship, I've never felt more at peace.